The air in the restaurant felt colder than usual. The thermostat was set to the same 75 degrees as always, but Vesper could feel the chill creeping up the dark skin of her arms. It was a frozen omen that had nothing to do with the temperature. Across the sturdy mahogany table, her husband, Cassius, was staring more at the screen of his cell phone than at the plate of braised short ribs he usually loved. The faint smile playing at the corner of his lips was certainly not for Vesper. That smile was directed at another world, hidden behind the illuminated glass in his hands. Vesper set her spoon down carefully, trying not to make any noise that might interrupt her husband's enjoyment. For the last 6 months, this scene had become her daily life. Cassius would arrive from work, drop his briefcase, shower, and then cling to his phone as if it were his life support. Their conversations had become brief and functional. They were limited to questions about whether he had eaten dinner or if he had anything pending for the next day. "Honey, how was the meeting this afternoon?" Vesper asked. "How was the meeting this afternoon?" Vesper asked. Her voice sounded a little more broken than she would have liked. She just wanted to tear down the invisible wall rising between them. Cassius lifted his head, and his eyes took a second to focus on her, like someone just returning from a distant trip. "The meeting? It went well, like always," he replied briefly. Before his thumb could dance nimbly over the screen again, Vesper took a deep breath. She was a woman who had built her own success from scratch. Her fashion empire, Vesper 5 Mode, now had 3 flagship locations in downtown Chicago, and her investment portfolio, carefully managed by herself, had grown to become a source of wealth that far exceeded Cassius's administrative salary. She was used to analyzing problems, finding solutions, and acting decisively. But in her marriage, she felt powerless. She knew something was wrong, but she kept hoping it was just a passing phase, a temporary boredom that would soon disappear. That night, her hope shattered. After that silent dinner, Cassius didn't go straight to his home office as usual. He followed Vesper into the living room and sat on the sofa opposite her, placing his phone face down on the coffee table. That simple act felt so formal, so heavy, that Vesper's stomach churned. "Vesper, I have to tell you something," Cassius began. His voice had a flat tone, devoid of emotion, like a doctor about to deliver a bad diagnosis. Vesper simply nodded. Her heart began to pound. She clasped her hands, which suddenly felt cold and clammy against her cocoa skin. "I think our marriage is over," Cassius continued. His eyes stared fixedly at the wall behind Vesper, avoiding direct eye contact. "I've thought about it a lot, and carefully. Let's get a divorce." The word divorce hung suspended in the air, feeling sharp and lethal. Vesper's world seemed to stop. The ticking of the grandfather clock, usually a soothing background noise, now sounded like the strikes of a giant gavel. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Her throat was closed tight. Cassius took his wife's silence as a sign of resignation. He continued his explanation with the same cold tone. "It's not your fault, Vesper. You've been a good wife, but I can't fool myself. I still love Cleo." That name. Cleo. The name of the ex-girlfriend Cassius had broken up with 8 years ago, long before meeting Vesper. The name Cassius mentioned occasionally in nostalgic stories, the name that had always made Vesper feel like an understudy in the movie of her husband's life. "I've been back in contact with her over the last few months," Cassius confessed without guilt, "and we've realized we never should have separated. I want to start over." Vesper finally found her voice, though it only came out as a hoarse whisper. "Start over." "Yes." Cassius nodded, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "For that, we need to resolve our problems as quickly and fairly as possible. Let's simply divide the assets down the middle. That will be the fastest way. This house, the savings, the investments. It's fair, isn't it?" That question was like a second slap, more painful than the request for divorce. Fair. This house was paid for entirely with the annual bonuses from Vesper's business. Most of the savings and almost all the investments came from the profits of her boutiques and her skill in the stock market. Cassius's salary was enough to cover daily expenses and his car payments, nothing more. But in Cassius's eyes, All of that was our wealth. They were the fruit of the effort from which he was ready to harvest half to start a new life with another woman. Vesper didn't answer. She just stared at her husband, the man who had slept beside her for 7 years, the man whose career she had supported, the black man she had loved sincerely. That man now looked like a stranger negotiating a corporate takeover instead of ending a marriage. That night, Vesper couldn't sleep. At 2 a.m, she got out of bed. She was thirsty. She walked slowly toward the kitchen to drink a glass of water. As she passed Cassius's home office, the door ajar, she heard her husband's voice. It was no longer flat or cold. It was full of laughter and warmth. "Hold on a little longer, baby. It'll be over soon," Cassius was saying to someone on the other end of the line. "The process will be quick. I've already told her." There was a brief silence. Vesper held her breath and leaned her ear closer to the crack in the door. How did she react? She was in shock, of course, but she's weak. She always has been. Cassius's laughter was heard again, light and carefree. "She won't complicate things. Vesper is too obsessed with me. She'll sign any paper I put in front of her. Don't worry, my love. All her assets, our assets, will be the capital for our new palace. You'll stop working, and we'll travel the world like we always dreamed." Our assets. Our new palace. Those 2 phrases hit Vesper like lightning. The pain burning in her heart transformed into a glacial cold. The tears that threatened to overflow seemed to dry up in an instant. She slowly backed away from the door. Her hands were clenched so tightly that her knuckles turned pale against her dark skin. She returned to the bedroom, but she didn't go to bed. She stood in front of the large, full-length mirror in the corner of the room. She observed her reflection. A woman with puffy eyes and a tired face. A woman they called weak. A woman considered foolish. But what she saw in her own eyes was no longer weakness. What she saw was the spark of a flame that had just begun to burn. A cold, focused, and lethal flame. Her pain had metamorphosed into something else, something stronger. Resolve. Cassius was very wrong. This war would indeed end quickly, but not the way he imagined. Vesper wouldn't complicate things in court, because there would be nothing left for him to fight for there. She would recover every dollar, every share, every brick she had built with sweat and tears. In the silence of that night, Vesper swore to herself. Cassius might take her past, but Vesper would reclaim her entire future. The next morning, the sun rose as usual over the Chicago skyline, but Vesper's world had changed completely. When she came down for breakfast, Cassius was already seated at the table drinking coffee and watching the news on his tablet. He looked up when Vesper arrived. Seeing her, a trace of surprise crossed his face. Vesper didn't look like a woman whose world had just crumbled. She had already showered. She was wearing an impeccable navy blouse, and her hair was pulled back into a sleek, elegant chignon, showing off her refined features. There was no trace of tears on her face, only an almost unnatural calm. "Good morning," Vesper greeted. Her voice was steady and quiet. She took a slice of toast and spread jam on it. Her movements were deliberate, unhurried. "Good morning," Cassius replied, a little uncomfortable. He watched her, trying to read her expression. "Are you okay?" "I'll be fine," Vesper replied, looking Cassius directly in the eyes without blinking. "I thought about what happened last night, and you're right. There's no point in holding on to something that can't be fixed anymore. Let's end this amicably." Cassius looked relieved. A faint smile appeared on his lips. As expected, Vesper was submissive and wouldn't create drama. "I'm glad you can think so maturely, Vesper. You've taken a weight off my shoulders." "I need some time alone today," Vesper continued, "to calm my mind and organize everything. I'll be working in the home office. Don't worry about me." Of course. Take all the time you need," Cassius said, with a magnanimous tone, feeling like the wisest man in the world. He finished his coffee, grabbed his briefcase, and left with a light step, convinced that the biggest obstacle had been easily resolved. As soon as the sound of Cassius's car faded down the street, Vesper's mask of calm collapsed instantly. She didn't cry, but her jaw tightened and her eyes filled with cold determination. Instead of going to the bedroom to weep, she walked briskly to her study. That room was her command center, the place where her business was born and raised. Today, that room would be the headquarters for the most important operation of her life. She locked the door, something she rarely did. Then she opened the safe hidden behind a landscape painting. Inside was not only jewelry, but a thick stack of original documents. She laid them all out on the wide desk. The deed to the house, the certificates for the apartment inherited from her parents, the titles to the commercial spaces she leased, the stock portfolio reports, the incorporation documents for her company, Vesper 5 Mode, and the financial reports for the last 5 years. She turned on her laptop and opened a spreadsheet. Systematically, she began to catalog all the assets they possessed. She divided them into 3 columns. First column, exclusively mine. The content was the assets she owned before getting married, like the apartment in downtown Chicago and the gold bullion inherited from her grandmother. These assets were legally hers, but she knew Cassius's cunning lawyer might try to question them. Second column, fruit of my effort. This was the longest column, the house where they lived, the mortgage of which was paid with the annual bonuses from the company, the villa in Lake Geneva, bought in the name of Vesper 5 Mode, the 3 boutique branches and everything in them, the portfolio of stocks and funds that now amounted to hundreds of thousands of dollars, all created with the profits from her business. Third column, joint property. Vesper almost let out a mocking laugh, seeing this column. The content was a single item, a joint bank account whose balance rose and fell for living expenses, and 2 cars, hers bought with cash and Cassius's, which he was still paying off in installments. Seeing this visualization on the screen, her anger became clearer. Cassius's demand to divide everything down the middle felt like daylight robbery. Vesper's hand went to her phone. Her fingers hesitated for a moment over the contact for her company's usual lawyer. No, she couldn't use the same one. Cassius knew him too. She needed someone new, someone unexpected, someone with a formidable reputation. She remembered a name a business associate had mentioned in passing. A black lawyer known as a wolf in sheep's clothing for his lethal strategies, despite his gentle appearance. She searched for the name online, Thaddeus King and Associates. Without hesitating, she dialed the number on the screen. Good morning, Thaddeus King and Associates. A woman's voice was heard on the other end. Good morning. I would like to speak with Attorney Thaddeus King. It is urgent, Vesper said. Her voice was firm. After a brief wait, a deep, calm voice greeted her. This is Thaddeus King. Hello, Attorney King. My name is Vesper Vance. I received your contact from a colleague. I need a personal consultation as soon as possible. It's regarding a divorce and asset protection. Has the petition been filed yet? Thaddeus went straight to the point. No, Vesper replied quickly. And I want everything to end before that happens. I don't want a fight in court. I want the war to be over before the enemy even knows it has begun. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line, as if Thaddeus were evaluating his potential client. I like your approach, Ms. Vance. Could you see me at my office today at lunch? No, Vesper cut in. I don't want to be seen visiting a law firm. We could meet somewhere else, somewhere discreet. Silence again. Then Thaddeus's voice was heard, this time with a slightly impressed tone. All right. There's a small soul food spot called the Velvet Lounge on the south side. It's quiet during the day. I'll see you at lunchtime. After hanging up, Vesper immediately contacted the second person on her team, her financial advisor and stockbroker, Eudora. Eudora was a very pragmatic middle-aged woman who had managed part of Vesper's investments with great loyalty for years. Eudora, I need help, Vesper said without preamble. I'm going to divorce Cassius. There was a moment of silence. I'm so sorry, Vesper. How can I help you? Eudora replied, her tone professional but empathetic. I need to liquidate some positions as soon as possible, but gradually so as not to impact the market or draw attention. And I need to open a new brokerage account and a bank account at a different bank, completely unlinked from my current accounts. Everything must be done in absolute secrecy. Understood, Eudora said. Send me the list of stocks you want to liquidate first. I'll prepare all the necessary documents for the new accounts. We can use a totally digital system, so no physical mail is left at your house. Thank you, Eudora. I owe you one. No need. Just consider it a large-scale portfolio restructuring. Eudora tried to lighten the mood. After finishing the call, Vesper felt a little stronger. The gears had already started to turn. Now was the time to take the first real step, the step to start the process of reclaiming her life. She opened the online banking app on her laptop. She logged into the joint account. The balance showed about $40,000. Most of it had automatically deposited 3 days ago as dividends from one of her investments. Cassius clearly didn't know or didn't care about the source of that money. He just knew there was money. Vesper opened the transfer menu and entered the account number for her company, Vesper 5 Mode. In the amount field, she typed $30,000. In the memo line, she wrote, "Payment to fabric suppliers, autumn collection." It was a very logical reason, and could be proven with a pro forma invoice she could create at any moment. Her finger hovered over the confirm button. Her heart was beating fast. This was the point of no return. This was the first act of active asset concealment. There was a tremor of fear, but behind it came a wave of greater power. She pressed the button. Transaction successful. She closed the laptop, put all the documents back in the safe, and locked it. She walked out of the study. Her face regained the same calm from the morning. She went to the kitchen, made herself some chamomile tea, and sat by the window to look at the garden. When Cassius returned home that evening, he found Vesper reading a book in the living room. "Have you calmed down a bit?" he asked. "Yes," Vesper replied softly, closing the book. "I'm ready to start the process whenever you want." Cassius smiled with satisfaction. He didn't know that the real process had already begun that morning, and he wasn't invited at all. During the following weeks, Vesper lived a double life with the precision of a veteran actress. On the surface, she was the hurt but stoic wife. She let her shoulders slump a little. She barely smiled, and her gaze often seemed lost in sadness. This performance was very convincing, especially for Cassius, whose ego was too big to see beyond what he wanted to see. "So, what papers are normally needed?" Vesper asked one night while they ate dinner in uncomfortable silence, poking at her food with her fork as if she had lost her appetite. "I don't know anything about this," she said. Cassius, feeling superior and in control, explained with feigned patience, "It's not complicated. My lawyer will prepare everything. The most important things are IDs, tax returns, and the marriage license. Then there will be a joint agreement. You just have to sign. The more you cooperate, the faster the process will end, and we can both start a new life." "Start a new life," Vesper repeated quietly, like a painful whisper to herself. Inside, she scoffed. Of course Cassius wanted to finish quickly. The faster it went, the less time Vesper would have to seek legal advice or think of ways to ruin his plans. "I just want to end in peace," Vesper added, looking at Cassius with intentional tears in her eyes. "I don't want to fight." "Of course there won't be a fight." Cassius patted the back of Vesper's hand, a gesture of comfort that felt deeply insulting. "I'll make sure everything goes smoothly." But behind that mask of submission, Vesper moved silently, quickly, and efficiently. The meeting with attorney Thaddeus King at the Velvet Lounge was her strategic turning point. Thaddeus, a man in his 50s with a paternal appearance and thin-rimmed glasses, didn't look like a wolf at all. He spoke softly and listened attentively without interrupting Vesper's story. "The situation is clear, Ms. Vance," Thaddeus said after Vesper finished. "The key is timing. Until the divorce petition is officially filed in court, the assets in your name are legally yours to manage, including selling or transferring them. We aren't doing anything illegal. We are simply restructuring the ownership of your personal assets." His strategy was simple but ingenious. The first focus was the assets easiest to liquidate and least directly related to Cassius's name: the investments. The next day, Vesper was on her way to one of her boutiques. As she drove, she spoke via hands-free with her broker, Eudora. Her voice sounded professional and calm, contrasting with her heartbeat, which was a little faster than normal. "Eudora, let's start with the tech stocks. Sell 50% of the holdings in Digital Horizon," Vesper ordered. "Yes, I'll execute the sale gradually over 3 days to get the best price. The funds will be deposited directly into the new brokerage account that's already set up," Eudora informed her. "Good. What about the bond funds?" "That's easier. The settlement process takes 2 or 3 business days. If you want, I can process it today." "Process it," Vesper said firmly. As she stopped at a traffic light, a police car pulled up right next to her. The officer inside glanced in her direction. Vesper's heart skipped a beat. An irrational fear invaded her. As a black woman in America, the sight of the cruiser always brought a distinct tension. But today she felt like a criminal, even though she was just protecting her rights. She took a deep breath and forced herself to remain calm. The light turned green, and she drove off slowly, leaving the patrol car behind. That moment reminded her of the risk she was taking and how important it was to maintain her composure. At home, she had to be constantly alert. Cassius, increasingly busy with his plans with Cleo, didn't pay much attention to details, but sometimes there were moments that left Vesper breathless. One afternoon, Cassius arrived early and found a pile of mail on the entryway console. He picked it up and started sorting through it. "Vesper, hasn't your credit card statement arrived this month?" he asked distractedly while opening the envelope of his own bill. Vesper's heart stopped for a second. She had registered all bills as electronic a month ago. "Oh yes, I switched everything to email billing. It's more convenient and we save paper," she replied calmly from the kitchen, bringing him a glass of water. "Ah, okay," Cassius muttered. His interest had already shifted to his own bill. On another occasion, Cassius asked, "I saw the joint account and the money has gone down quite a bit. What did you spend it on?" Vesper had the answer ready. "I used that as a deposit for the silk fabrics coming from India for the new bridal gown collection. I made the transfer as company money so it won't enter into our calculation of common assets. Don't worry." She showed him a fake order confirmation email she had prepared on her phone. The explanation, touching on logical and business aspects, sounded very plausible. Cassius, who didn't understand the ins and outs of Vesper's business at all, simply nodded and didn't ask any more. Every successful little lie, every secret transaction that proceeded without problems, infused her with confidence. She became increasingly expert at hiding her tracks. She used a VPN every time she accessed her secret accounts. She communicated with Thaddeus and Eudora through encrypted messaging apps. She was a ghost within her own financial system. One night, Vesper was sitting in her study long after Cassius had fallen asleep. On her laptop screen was a spreadsheet named Project Independence. It contained the list of all the assets she had secured. She had just received confirmation from Eudora that the total from the sale of the tech stocks had been successfully transferred to her new hidden bank account. With cold satisfaction, she moved the cursor to the row that said Digital Horizon Shares. She typed completed in the status column. She looked at the word for a moment. Every completed she typed was a step further away from a painful past and a step closer to a future she controlled completely. She closed the laptop. The mask felt heavy, but the burden lifting off her shoulders felt much lighter. She would keep playing the role of the submissive wife until the curtain fell completely, and when that moment arrived, she would be ready to receive the applause for her greatest performance, alone on the stage. After securing the liquid assets like stocks and funds, Vesper knew the next challenge would be much more complex and dangerous. It was time to move on to the physical assets, blocks of wealth that couldn't be moved with a single click. Real estate. Her eyes fixed on the most important target in this category, the luxurious villa in Lake Geneva that they used often on weekends. The villa had been bought 3 years ago, not personally, but as an asset of Vesper's company, Vesper 5 Mode. This fact was both the weak point and the key to her strategy. The plan to sell the villa required extreme meticulousness. It was no longer a silent digital transaction, but a process involving notaries, physical documents, and potential buyers. Here, Thaddeus's role became crucial. This time, they met at a busy family restaurant during the lunch rush. Thaddeus explained the plan in a low voice amidst the bustle of the place. "We will carry out a legitimate sales transaction," Thaddeus explained. "Vesper V. Mode will sell the villa. The buyer will be our new investment society, Skyline Holdings. This company on paper will be totally owned by your mother." Vesper nodded, understanding the direction. "So, the money just moves from my company account to a company controlled by my mother?" "Exactly. Technically, the money leaves the scope of Vesper 5 Mode's assets, so it can't be claimed as a company asset in the division of property. But in practice, it remains under your total control through your mother. We'll set the selling price slightly below market to create a convincing reason for a quick transaction," Thaddeus revealed. The process began. Thaddeus quickly processed the incorporation of Skyline Holdings. Meanwhile, Vesper began preparing the sales documents from Vesper 5 Mode through her trusted manager, Mr. Abernathy. They had to move fast. The longer the property was in process, the greater the chance the news would reach Cassius's ears. The moment Vesper feared most finally arrived one weekend. Cassius approached her in an unusually cheerful mood. "Honey, I have a good idea," he said, using a pet name he hadn't used in a long time. "Let's go to the lake house next week. Let's take Cleo to show it to her. Let's say it's an early introduction before everything is formalized." Vesper's stomach tightened. The request was not only insensitive, but very dangerous for her plan. Refusing flatly would arouse suspicion. "Cassius," Vesper replied, trying to sound exhausted, "I don't want to go there right now. There are too many memories." She paused and added the information she had prepared. "Besides, the villa is currently on the market for long-term rental. Mr. Abernathy is handling it and told me there are several serious candidates going to see it this week. It's best not to get in the way now. If we get rental income later, it'll be good for us too, right?" The bait worked. At the prospect of passive income from the villa, Cassius's eyes lit up. "Oh, good idea. You really have a talent for making money." He praised her without realizing the irony of his words. "Okay, leave it to Abernathy. Tell him to charge the highest rent possible. Yeah, then we'll split the profits." "Of course, honey," Vesper replied with a faint smile. But Cassius was impulsive. 3 days later, he decided to go to Lake Geneva alone without telling Vesper. He used the excuse of wanting to check the condition of the villa before renting it. But his true intention was to take some photos to brag to Cleo. The moment Cassius's car pulled into the driveway of the villa, Vesper's heart, dozens of miles away in Chicago, seemed to stop. She had just received a short text from Mr. Abernathy. "The boss is here. Relax. The situation is under control." At the villa, Mr. Abernathy, a middle-aged black man whose loyalty to Vesper was unshakable, was playing his role to perfection. In fact, he was there with a young couple, his niece and nephew, who were pretending to be potential European tenants. "Good morning, sir," Mr. Abernathy greeted politely when Cassius entered. He introduced himself as an associated real estate agent, not just the manager of Vesper Mode. "I'm the owner of this house," Cassius said arrogantly, inspecting the living room. "I understand. My wife said she was going to rent it out." "Correct, sir. I am here with a couple of candidates from Germany," Mr. Abernathy replied fluently, pointing to his relatives, who nodded politely. Cassius was satisfied. He walked through the villa, imagining himself and Cleo relaxing by the pool. He even chatted briefly with Mr. Abernathy to give him instructions. "Make sure to collect the rent in dollars, of course. It's a premium property. And then hand the report to me. I need to know about it too, understood?" "Of course, sir. I will report to Ms. Vesper Vance, who is the director of the company owning this property, and she will transmit it to you," Mr. Abernathy replied diplomatically, subtly emphasizing once again who the legal owner of the asset was. Cassius frowned a bit hearing that, but didn't think too much about it. After taking some photos, he left. As soon as Cassius's car disappeared from view, Mr. Abernathy immediately called Vesper. "That was close, ma'am," Mr. Abernathy said. His breathing sounded relieved. "Thank you, Mr. Abernathy. You don't know how much your help means," Vesper replied. Her hand was still trembling a little, holding the phone. The incident served as a catalyst to accelerate everything. 2 days later, the purchase agreement between Vesper Vivmode and Skyline Holdings was signed before the notary chosen by Thaddeus. The hundreds of thousands of dollars from the sale of the villa were transferred the same day. The money was now safe, stored in a company account that Cassius couldn't touch. That night, Vesper stared distractedly out her bedroom window. She had successfully defended another fortress, but the victory felt empty. She had to dismantle the building of her life brick by brick just to save it from the partner who should have been her husband. Every step forward in her plan seemed like a step backward from the beautiful memories they once had, but she knew there was no turning back. She had to keep unraveling the skein of wealth until not a single thread was tangled in Cassius's greed. After successfully saving the villa, Vesper faced her biggest challenge, protecting the jewel in the crown of her kingdom, Vesper Fifth Mode. This company wasn't just an asset. It was the embodiment of her effort, creativity, and years of sacrifice. Letting Cassius take half of this company was like giving up half of her identity. Selling the company wasn't an option. She couldn't abandon the business she had built from scratch. The strategy she designed with Thaddeus was much more elegant and complex. They would restructure the ownership of the shares based on a legally manipulated debt relationship. The basis of this plan lay in a credible fact. 7 years ago, when Vesper started the boutique, she received initial financial support from her mother. The amount wasn't huge, but enough to rent the first space and buy the initial inventory. That money was considered a gift. There was never a repayment contract. Now, that gift would turn into a capital loan. Thaddeus carefully drafted a loan agreement with a retroactive date. The document stipulated that Vesper's mother had lent her the capital, and that if it wasn't repaid in cash within 7 years, the loan would convert into 75% of the shares of Vesper Fivmode. The document was made to look authentic. "This is a move in a gray area, Ms. Vance," Thaddeus warned in an encrypted call. "But legally, it is difficult to challenge, especially because there is proof of the initial bank transfer from your mother to you. We can allege that was the disbursement of the loan. A trial would be your mother's word against your husband's. And in family businesses, judges tend to trust written contracts more." Vesper agreed. She preferred to risk the gray area than serve her life's work on a silver platter. The next step was to count on the help of her most trusted insider, Mr. Abernathy. One afternoon, Vesper called Mr. Abernathy to her office in the main boutique. She closed the door and poured a cup of tea for the man who had been with her since the boutique was just a small, cramped room. "Mr. Abernathy," Vesper began with a serious tone, "I am going to divorce my husband." Mr. Abernathy looked at her with concern, but not surprise. As someone close to Vesper, he had sensed for a long time that there were problems in his boss's home. "That is unfortunate news, ma'am. Whatever decision you make, you have my support." "Thank you," Vesper said sincerely. "That's why I need your help. Cassius thinks he has a right to half of this company that we built together from scratch. I cannot tolerate that. It's not just my problem, Mr. Abernathy. It's also about the future for you and all the employees who depend on this company." Vesper explained the plan to restructure the ownership of the shares to her mother in the form of debt payment. She didn't mention that the contract had just been created. She only presented it as an old obligation she had to fulfill. Mr. Abernathy's loyalty did not waver. "Understood, ma'am. What should I do?" "I need you to prepare all internal financial documents, balance sheets, and income statements. Everything must reflect that there was a debt obligation to the initial investor. We must make the entire paper trail look natural and consistent," Vesper ordered. During the next week, Vesper and Mr. Abernathy worked overtime, reviewed old books, inserted notes backing the story of the capital loan, and prepared all the necessary documents for a fictional general shareholders meeting. Only Vesper, as the majority shareholder, and a few management-level employees who held minority stakes as part of the incentive program would attend that meeting. They were all loyal to Vesper and would approve anything she proposed. On the appointed day, the share transfer procedure was executed at the notary's office. Her mother, a retired woman with a gentle appearance but eyes sharp like her daughter's, signed the documents without asking many questions. She just took Vesper's hand and said, "Take back what is yours, baby girl." With the seal and signature of the notary on the deed, 75% of the ownership of Vesper 5 Mode officially passed into her mother's hands. Vesper would continue to hold the position of CEO and have total control over the daily operations of the company, but on paper, she was no longer the majority owner. The intrinsic value of the company was now safe from Cassius's legal reach. That afternoon, after everything was finished, Vesper stood alone in the closed main boutique. She touched the beautiful dresses on display, feeling the texture of the high-quality fabrics. She had saved her kingdom, but the feeling of victory was tinged with bitterness. She felt like a general who has to burn her own fields so they don't fall into enemy hands. She had protected her business by renouncing her official ownership, a painful sacrifice, but necessary. She looked at herself in the large mirror in the corner. Her face looked tired, but her eyes shone with unwavering determination. The battle wasn't over yet, but her main fortress now stood firm and impenetrable. As time went on, Cassius's arrogant calm began to crumble slowly. Cleo, who at first had waited patiently, became increasingly impatient. The vision of the luxurious life Cassius had promised seemed further and further away, and she began to unload her frustration on him. "It's been almost 2 months. When is this going to end?" Cleo demanded on a call. Her voice sounded shrill. "I'm sick of waiting in this small apartment. I've seen a house in the Gold Coast, but prices keep going up." "Hold on a bit, babe." Cassius tried to calm her down. "Legal proceedings take time. Vesper said she is organizing all the financial reports for a fair distribution. She is cooperating." "Cooperating." A sarcastic laugh was heard on the other end of the line. "Is she organizing, or is she hiding? You're too soft. You have to take control. Check all her accounts, her investments. Maybe she's already moved all the money. We're going to start from scratch empty-handed." Cleo's words wounded Cassius's pride. Being called soft was the biggest insult to him. Driven by the doubt Cleo had sown, he decided to start investigating. Since he didn't want to look flustered in front of Vesper, he acted secretly. That night, while Vesper was showering, Cassius went into the home office, turned on the laptop, and tried to open the portal for one of the joint investment accounts he hadn't checked in a long time. He entered the username and password he remembered. Failed. He tried again, but it kept failing. The message appeared on the screen. Incorrect username or password. He tried the password recovery function, hoping the recovery link would be sent to his email. But the system informed him that the link had been sent to the primary registered email address. As far as he knew, that was Vesper's personal email. A bad feeling began to invade him. The next day, he called the customer service of the brokerage firm. After a complex identity verification process, he finally was able to speak with an employee. "I can't log into my account. The account number is ending in 34, Cassius complained. "Yes, sir. Let me check," said the employee. After a moment of silence, the employee spoke again. "According to our data, the password for this account was changed 2 weeks ago by the primary holder, Ms. Vesper Vance." Cassius's heart beat a little faster. "Changed? Why was it changed?" "We don't have information on the reason, sir. As a secondary holder, you do not have authorization to change the password or request recovery. You must contact the primary holder." Cassius hung up angrily. That night he worked up the courage to confront Vesper. He tried to use a relaxed tone, pretending to ask casually. "Vesper, I tried to get into our investment account a while ago, but I couldn't. It seems the password has changed." Vesper, who was reading a book on the sofa, lifted her head. Her expression was calm, without the slightest trace of surprise. She expected this question. "Oh, that," she replied with a dry tone. "My financial advisor took care of it. During the divorce process, it was agreed that she would have access temporarily to ensure there are no buy or sell transactions by either party before the official court decision. She told me it's standard procedure to protect assets and ensure everything is fair and transparent. The explanation was ingenious. Vesper used the words fair, transparent, and protect. She gave back to Cassius the words he used to reassure her. The reason sounded very professional, logical, and even seemed to benefit Cassius himself. Cassius's suspicion diminished a little, but didn't disappear completely. Financial advisor. Since when do you use an advisor? Since you asked me for a divorce, Vesper replied briefly. Her eyes went back to the book in her hands. I don't know anything about divorce laws or finances. I needed someone to advise me so I wouldn't make a misstep that would hurt me or you. That answer silenced Cassius. That a weak and ignorant woman would seek professional help sounded reasonable, but the seed of doubt was planted. He began to notice little things. Vesper hurriedly ended her calls when he entered the room. She no longer left her laptop open. She seemed to go out more frequently with the excuse of meeting suppliers or managing the branches. But when she returned, her face looked tired but determined. This was no longer passive sadness, but focused activity. One night, Cassius woke up and found the side of the bed empty. He searched the whole house and found Vesper sitting on the balcony, simply looking into the darkness of the night. She wasn't crying, she was just sitting in silence with her back straight. There was an aura of strange strength around her, an aura that frightened Cassius a little. "Haven't you slept yet?" he asked. Vesper turned her head. Her eyes were clear under the garden light. "I was just getting some fresh air. I have a lot to think about." Cassius went back to bed alone that night. His anxiety did nothing but grow. Cleo's complaints kept ringing in his ears, mixing with the image of an increasingly mysterious and unreadable Vesper. For the first time he felt that his plan, which he considered perfect, might have a flaw. The name of that flaw was Vesper. He tried to dismiss that feeling as paranoia, assuring himself that everything was still going according to plan. But deep down he knew that the calm before the storm was over, and dark clouds were beginning to gather on the horizon. Time seemed to run faster and faster. Every moment brought Vesper closer to the finish line she had created herself. Cassius was now talking more often with his lawyer about preparing the final documents. Vesper knew she only had a few days left, maybe a week at most, before the divorce petition was officially filed and all joint assets were automatically frozen by law. She had to complete the last step. Her last asset of interest was the joint bank account, the household operating account, which until now had been the symbol of their financial union in name only. Compared to the hundreds of thousands of dollars she had secured in investments and real estate, the amount in this account was relatively small. But for Vesper, securing these funds had a deep symbolic meaning. It was about cutting the last tie that bound her to Cassius, liquidating the last financial vestige of her former life. That night, Vesper waited until past midnight. The faint snoring of Cassius from the bedroom was the signal that she could move safely. She slipped into the office. Turning on the laptop, a familiar tension enveloped her. This would probably be the last time she performed this covert operation. She opened the online banking portal and looked at the screen. The balance of the joint account showed about $35,000. Most of it came from her and Cassius's salaries from the last month, plus the remainder of other unforeseen funds. She could have taken it all. The temptation existed. A small whisper wanted to leave that account at zero to return all the pain to his heart. But Vesper shook her head at that whisper. Her goal wasn't blind revenge, but calculated justice. Her victory had to be clean, flawless, and as irreproachable as possible. She opened the transaction history and calculated carefully. Cassius's salary from the last month was about $4,000. The remainder of other funds she couldn't directly claim as hers was about $1,000. Total, $5,000. She decided to leave that amount in the account. She would only take the part she could clearly prove came from her salary transfer and business income. She opened the transfer menu and moved $30,000 to her new personal account. The transaction went through smoothly in seconds. Upon finishing, she looked at the remaining balance of $5,000, enough for Cassius to survive a month or two. This wasn't an act of generosity. It was a strategic measure. By leaving an amount, she made it difficult for Cassius to accuse her of total theft or leaving him destitute. This showed that she wasn't moved by greed, but by prudent calculation. She closed the laptop. Immense relief enveloped her, but also an unexpected sadness. The door was now truly closed. There were no more financial connections. There was no more ours, only mine and his. Her silent war was over. Now only the declaration of victory remained. The next day, Vesper began preparing for the confrontation. She didn't pack big suitcases. That might look desperate and arouse suspicion if Cassius saw it. Instead, she packed a single medium suitcase. Inside, she put her favorite clothes, some cherished personal objects, her laptop, and most importantly, a dark blue document folder. That folder was her arsenal. Inside were copies of the reports from the new bank account, showing a fantastic balance, the notarized sales contract for the lake house, the documents for the new ownership structure of Vesper Mode, with her mother's name as majority shareholder, and a brief summary from her lawyer regarding the legality of all her actions. Perfectly organized, every paper inside the folder was a bullet ready to be fired. During the next 2 days, she followed her usual routine, but maintaining a higher level of alertness. She waited. Every time Cassius returned from work, her heart pounded, wondering if this was the moment. And on Friday afternoon, the moment arrived. Cassius came home with a lighter step than usual. A smile of satisfaction played on his lips. In his hand, he carried a brown leather briefcase that looked expensive. "We're dining out tonight," Cassius said with a feigned, cheerful tone. "I have something to show you. Let's think of it as a celebration of the beginning of our new separate lives." Vesper looked at the briefcase in Cassius's hand and then nodded slowly. "No need to go out. Let's talk here," she replied with a calm voice that hid the storm. The dawn of the last chapter of her life with Cassius was breaking. The stage was set, and Vesper, director and lead actress, was ready for the final scene. They were seated face to face at the same mahogany dining table where the divorce demand was first raised, but this time the dynamic was different. Cassius radiated an aura of victory, while Vesper emanated an icy calm. Cassius placed the brown leather briefcase on the table with a theatrical movement. "Ready, Vesper," he began. His tone was condescending, as if speaking to a child. "My lawyer is very good. All the papers are perfect. The divorce agreement, the list of common assets to split down the middle, everything. We just have to sign before the notary tomorrow and file it in court, quick, clean, and without drama." He pushed the briefcase toward Vesper. "Read it first so you're satisfied. I've detailed everything. This house, the villa, the savings, the value of your business, we split it fairly. Vesper." Vesper didn't even touch the briefcase. She let it remain between them like a monument to Cassius's greed. Instead, she took her own blue folder that had been on the chair next to her. With movements just as calm, she put it on the table. "I've also prepared some documents for you to see," Vesper said. Her voice was clear and unwavering. Cassius let out a little chuckle, a laugh of contempt. "What documents? A letter from your spiritual guru? No need, Vesper. This isn't an emotional problem. It's legal." Vesper ignored the sarcasm. She opened the blue folder and pulled out the first sheet. It was a copy of the joint account report dated that day. "This is our joint account," Vesper said, sliding the paper toward Cassius. "The balance is $5,000. $2,500 for you, $2,500 for me. Fair, right?" Cassius's face changed. His smile disappeared. "What are you talking about? Our savings are hundreds of thousands." Vesper pulled out the second sheet, the report from her new bank account with a long row of zeros at the end. "Those are my savings, not our savings. Money from my salary, company bonuses, and investment profits. All moved here." Cassius's eyes opened with disbelief. You can't do that." "No, yes I can," Vesper replied, now pulling out the third sheet, the sales contract for the villa. "And as for the villa, you're late. That villa wasn't a personal asset. It was a company asset. And I, as the administrator of Vesper 5 Mode at that time, decided to sell it last month for business efficiency. Here is the legal sales contract. Cassius snatched the paper from her hands. He saw the name of her company, Vesper 5 Mode, as the seller, and an unknown name, Skyline Holdings, as the buyer. His hands began to shake. This is impossible. I never gave my consent. Your consent wasn't needed. It was a corporate transaction, Vesper explained with lethal patience. And the money from the sale went into the company account, money that, of course, cannot be divided as joint personal property. Cassius was breathing with difficulty. His face reddened with anger and a fear that was slowly creeping in. The company? At least I have a right to half of your company. We built it together. Really? Vesper arched an eyebrow. She pulled out the last document, the deadliest one, a copy of the deed of change of ownership for Vesper 5 Mode. According to this notarized deed, I am only a minority shareholder in my company. 75% of the shares belong to my mother as a condition for repaying the capital I borrowed when I started the business. A debt that matured just before you asked for the divorce. What a coincidence, right? Cassius looked at the document. Vesper's mother's name was clearly written as the majority shareholder. His legs failed him. All his plans, the palace with Cleo, his luxurious future. Everything crumbled before his eyes in less than 5 minutes. This is fraud, he shouted, slamming the table. It's illegal. You've stolen my money. I'm going to sue you. I'm going to destroy you. For the first time, Vesper smiled. Not a warm smile, but a cold smile full of victory. She stood up from the chair. Sue me. My lawyer will be delighted to face you in court. But first, ask your lawyer. Ask him if it's illegal for a wife to manage assets legally registered in her name. If it's illegal to sell company assets. If it's illegal for someone to pay their debts. Vesper paused, letting her words sink in. You said I was weak. You were wrong. My true weakness was letting you underestimate me for so long, believing for so long that the man sleeping beside me wanted the best for me. Now I have recovered everything that is mine. She walked toward the front door where her suitcase was waiting for her. Build your new palace with Cleo, but you'll have to lay the first stone yourself. Goodbye. Saying that, Vesper grabbed the handle of the suitcase, opened the door, and walked out into the cool Chicago night without looking back. The sound of the door closing behind her sounded like a judge's gavel, the sound announcing that the trial was over and the sentence had been passed. Cassius stood alone in the large but now empty house, surrounded by the paper fragments of his shattered plans. The silence Vesper left behind was more deafening than Cassius's screams moments before. For a few minutes, Cassius simply sat staring at the 2 briefcases on the table, his brown leather briefcase, now useless, and Vesper's blue folder, which had become the tombstone of his future. The reality hit him with the force of a freight train. This wasn't a nightmare. It was real. His first reaction was denial mixed with panic. He grabbed his phone. His hands were trembling so much he could barely dial his lawyer's number. Thaddeus, no, the other lawyer, Perez, he shouted as soon as the call connected, with no time for formalities. My wife has tricked me. She's moved all the money, she sold the villa, she transferred the company shares. This is fraud. We have to sue her. Everything must be frozen. On the other end of the line, a tired sigh was heard from the lawyer. Calm down, Mr. Sterling. Explain it to me slowly. When did these transactions happen? I don't know. Probably in the last few weeks. And has our divorce petition been officially filed in court? The lawyer asked sharply. No. I plan to do it tomorrow. A long silence followed. Cassius could feel the bad omen thickening. Attorney Perez? Are you still there, Mr. Sterling? The lawyer's voice was flat and professional. I have to tell you a harsh reality. If all the transactions happened before our divorce petition was officially filed, and those assets were legally in your wife's or her company's name, what she has done is, in almost all likelihood, completely legal. Legal? Cassius whined, unable to believe what he was hearing. That isn't theft, sir. That is called asset management. Legally, until there is a court judgment or an asset freeze, she is free to do what she wants with properties that are hers. You should have filed the petition as soon as you decided to divorce. You gave her too much time. From a legal point of view, she didn't cheat you. She simply outsmarted you. The phone slipped from Cassius's hand and fell to the floor with a dull thud. Outsmarted. The words echoed in his head. Vesper, whom he considered weak, submissive, and foolish, had outplayed him so completely. The next thought was Cleo. He had to tell her. With hands still trembling, he called his lover. "Hello, baby. So what happened? When do we sign?" Cleo's voice was cheerful and full of hope. "Cleo, there's a problem," Cassius whispered. His voice was hoarse. "The money, the properties. Vesper took it all. Everything is gone." Silence. Not of surprise, but a cold and deadly silence. "What do you mean gone?" Cleo asked. Her voice dropped several octaves. "She moved everything. She sold the villa. The shares are in her mother's name. There's only a little left in the joint account and this house, which still has a mortgage," Cassius explained. "You fool." A harsh and unpleasant laugh burst out on the other end of the line. "Gone. You let her take everything. Are you an idiot or what? I threw my life away for your promises, and now you tell me everything is gone? I didn't know she would do this. You thought she was dumb. Turns out the dummy was you." Cleo cut him off cruelly. "I don't want to live struggling. I'm not starting from scratch with a loser like you. Don't contact me again." The call cut off. Click. Just like that, the true love he had used as a reason to destroy his marriage turned out to be nothing more than a bank balance. Now he was alone, truly alone. Panic turned into total despair. He had to contact Vesper. He had to beg. He went back to the phone and started sending texts in rapid succession. The first message was full of anger. "Vesper Vance, you're going to regret this. I won't stand still." No answer. The second message contained threats. "I'll tell everyone how twisted you are. I'll ruin your reputation and your business." Still silence. The third message began to soften with negotiation. Okay, I was wrong. I'm sorry. Let's talk properly again. Don't do this. I'll give you whatever you want." Still no answer. Finally, his mask of arrogance fell completely and turned into a pathetic plea. "Vesper, please don't leave me like this. I have nothing. I'm sorry for everything. Please answer my text." He waited an hour. His eyes were fixed on the phone screen, waiting for some sign of life. Suddenly he tried to send another message, but there was something strange. The message didn't deliver, just a confirmation tick that never turned blue. He tried to call. The call wouldn't connect. Vesper had blocked him. That realization was the final blow. What destroyed him wasn't the shouting or the insults. It was Vesper's total silence. That silence was his sentence. He was no longer considered worthy of even an answer. Cassius threw himself onto the sofa in the dark living room. The large house, once a symbol of his success, now felt like a cold tomb. He was surrounded by expensive furniture and empty memories. The remains of his greed were scattered around him, and he was the only inhabitant of those ruins. Swallowed by late regret, a year passed. Time, which once felt like a slow enemy in days full of anxiety, had now become a healing ally. A year proved to be enough time to crumble a world and also enough to build a completely new one. In a penthouse with panoramic views of the glittering Chicago night, Vesper began her morning. The fresh air of the city greeting her on the balcony carried the scent of the city bustle and new beginnings. She no longer lived in the big house filled with bitter memories. She had moved not only physically, but also mentally and emotionally. Her appearance had also changed. She wore her hair shorter in a modern, natural cut that framed her face, a face that now radiated confidence at every moment. Her clothes were no longer just cute boutique outfits. She wore sharp-colored business suits and elegant evening gowns from international designers. She was no longer just the owner of a local boutique. She was a businesswoman whose name was beginning to ring out in the European fashion world. That morning, she had just finished a video call with her team in Chicago. Vesper 5 Mode, which was now officially her property again after repurchasing the shares from her mother with personal funds, was in the process of massive expansion. They were preparing the opening of their first flagship boutique abroad in Paris. "All preparations are on track, Director," reported Mr. Abernathy, who appeared on the laptop screen with a cheerful face. "The logistics partners are ready, and the visual team has finished the interior design. We are on schedule." "Very good, Mr. Abernathy," Vesper said with a sincere smile. "Thank you for your hard work and that of the team. I couldn't have done this without y'all." After finishing the call, Vesper went to the coffee machine and made herself an intense espresso. While sipping the coffee, she looked at the horizon. The divorce trial itself had ended 6 months ago. Through his desperate lawyer, Cassius tried to counterattack. He sued Vesper for fraud and embezzlement, but Thaddeus's legal team easily refuted all the allegations. It was proven that all of Vesper's transactions were performed legally before the petition was filed and were related to assets under her legal control. In the end, Cassius got nothing more than what Vesper had left him. Their divorce was approved with the division of assets according to the final state, which meant Cassius only got half of the remaining funds in the joint account and the obligation to keep paying the house mortgage on his own. Vesper sometimes remembered him, but there was no longer pain. The memory was now like watching an old movie about someone else. She had learned that Cassius's betrayal didn't reflect her shortcomings, but the fragility of the man's character. The pain had been the fertilizer for her strength, forcing her to grow into a version of herself she had never imagined before. She felt at peace, whole, and most importantly, free. On the other side of town, in a cramped studio in an older building on the outskirts, Cassius lived his new life. The big house had to be sold because he couldn't make the payments. After paying the remaining mortgage and other expenses, there wasn't much money left. He now worked at a startup with a salary far below his previous standard of living. That night, he was sitting alone on a worn-out sofa. His room was only lit by the light of his cell phone. He was browsing social media, an old habit, a habit that started his ruin and had now become his daily source of torture. His finger stopped on a post from a famous business magazine, Black Enterprise. It was a photo from the Businesswoman of the Year awards ceremony. In the center of the stage, wearing a stunning burgundy dress, was a black woman holding a crystal trophy with a radiant smile. That woman was Vesper. Cassius looked at the photo for a long time. The woman in the photo looked so strange, not because of the hairstyle or the clothes, but because of the aura of power and happiness emanating from her. That was a Vesper he never knew, or more accurately, a Vesper he never wanted to see. Just then, the final, most painful realization hit him. He realized that what he had wasted wasn't just money or assets. He had wasted a woman who had the intelligence to build a kingdom, the strength to withstand storms, and the loyalty to stand by his side. All the qualities he considered weaknesses, patience, integrity, Vesper's kindness, were actually the pillars of her strength. He had thrown away a diamond, blinded by the shine of cheap glass called Cleo. Ah, Cleo. The last time Cassius saw her was also on social media, posing affectionately with another older rich man. The cycle continued, and he was just one of the victims of his own stupidity. Regret felt like acid in his stomach. Not just regret for the loss of wealth, but a deeper regret for his foolishness, arrogance, and failure as a man. He turned off the phone, and the darkness of the room seemed to swallow him whole. The only property left to him was eternal regret. Back in the penthouse, Vesper put down the coffee cup. She looked at her reflection in the large window. Behind her, the interior of the elegant apartment was visible. In front of her stretched a brilliant urban landscape full of promises and opportunities. She no longer looked back. The past was a lesson, not a prison. With a faint smile of assurance, she turned away from the window, ready to receive the new day and ready to conquer a new world. The dawn had arrived, and this dawn was entirely hers. Did you like the story, and which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen you can see 2 new